Welcome back to the Shacknews Awards 2023. We are trucking along here, kind of rounding the turn, getting to some of these really big awards. We're going to talk about Best Developer of the Year 2023. But before we do that, I think it's important to note that a lot of developers had a very rough year as individuals. Studios have been laying off developers left and right. Studios have been closed. Companies are making these decisions in favor of profit over maybe quality. And this isn't true of every studio. This isn't true of every developer. But it has been a trend all year, and it would be insensitive to start this category without at least mentioning the individual sacrifice of a lot of people to get these games out the door this year and every year. So if you've lost your job this year, we hope you land somewhere else safely. This is the nature of technology as a whole, but definitely the video games industry. And I just wanted to mention that before I listed off these nominees, because while it's been a great year for video game releases, it has not been a great year for video game developers as individuals. With that out of the way, we do want to celebrate video games here at the Shacknews Awards, and here are the nominees for Best Developer. Nintendo, Capcom, Larian Studios, Iron Mace, Insomniac Games, and Remedy. Where should we start? I could talk a little bit about Nintendo and get the ball rolling there. It's been a pretty big year for Nintendo as a developer. You know, their first party releases, I believe this is year 7 or 6, however you want to define the Switch cycle. They came out the gate with obviously Advance Wars Reboot Camp 1+2. And then shortly after that launched The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is one of the biggest games in terms of scope I think Nintendo has ever shipped. Very highly rated by reviewers, and obviously one of my favorite games of the year. But yeah, Nintendo, I think they probably would have been nominated for this category if all they did was ship Tears of the Kingdom this year. But they went on to give us even more excellent video games this year.
We got 2 in a year. 2.
2 what?
Like 2 big first-party releases from Nintendo in over 12 months? That's short. Usually they're a little more spread out, right?
Oh, so you mean everybody 1-2 Switch and Zelda?
There you go.
Or are you talking?
Wait, only 2? Like,
that's what I'm saying.
A lot.
That's what I'm saying. Like, well, Greg thinks there's been 2 tentpole releases. I'd like to point out that yes, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, was announced in June and came out in October on the same day as Spider-Man 2 launched on PlayStation 5. But then just a month later, they launched Super Mario RPG Remake, and even before that, on September 14th, against all odds, F-Zero 99 just came out of thin air during a Nintendo Direct. You know, there's been probably... Oh, wait, what? We forgot another one. Pikmin 4 came out in summer.
Pikmin 4, that's right, yeah. Oh my god.
These are all very large Nintendo franchises. All of them. Every single one that I mentioned.
The list goes on.
Everybody 1-2 Switch came out this year, which is probably the biggest hit to
my game of the year.
Their
number 1
category.
Yeah, I look, Donovan. Yeah, I have to give you all the facts, right? They also came out with WarioWare Move It this year.
It's a real blemish on their year. I mean, it was a great year for Nintendo, but that is a game that they developed.
They did, and they got it out the door. I'm just saying, it was a game that was released this year, you know, and in true, hey, we want to launch. We wanted to give everyone another launch title that everyone loved, another sequel to a highly anticipated. No one liked 1-2 Switch. You didn't like milking cows with Joy-Con.
I liked it so much that everybody 1-2 Switch is the first and second entries on my top 10 list.
Wow. Impressive. I will throw that ballot out. But yeah, I just wanted to list what Nintendo released this year, because this is the last year, I think, of a lot of Switch releases. Like, this is this was the last year for. This is the last time we're gonna see a Zelda game on the Switch. It's the last time we're gonna see a flagship Mario game on the Switch. And I know Princess Peach is coming out next year, and Mario plus Mario versus Donkey Kong. Like smaller games are still gonna come out on the platform, but they launched Switch with Breath of the Wild, and then they ended that year with Mario Odyssey, and they launched this year with Tears of the Kingdom. And they ended it with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I just think they did fans a huge service, and in between they gave us Pikmin 4 and F-Zero 99, which were both delightful games. So yeah, Nintendo had a hell of a year, and they tend to have really good years. So they're frequently nominated in this category, so it's no surprise to see them here today as well. But we should move on to the next nominee, right? Unless anyone else has something they want to say about Nintendo right now. No? Okay. Our next nominee is Capcom. Who wants to talk about Capcom? This is a studio that released the Resident Evil 4 remake this year, as well as Street Fighter 6 and Exoprimal.
Well,
yeah. Why do you have to take fault over that?
Look, if I'm going to talk about everybody 1-2 Switch, you better believe I'm going to bring up Exoprimal.
Yeah,
Exoprimal is better than
Exoprimal. Yeah, far better.
Yeah, it's a better game than everybody 1-2 Switch. I'm just saying. Like, what are we talking about development here? What are we talking about? So, who wants to talk about No, seriously though. Capcom, Denny. It felt like you were about to say something there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a big year for Capcom with RE4 doing RE4 things, but also Street Fighter, making big waves as despite it being the outer range of game, as David would say, in the rotation. But I think that it's been a big year for Capcom. I think that leaning into being kind of like the definitive fighting game on that end for them is always a good idea, since they have an entire Capcom Cup every year. It's probably good to have a good one on the horizon. But they've done some good things. They could have backed off a bit with some of that as far as the changes or just overall scope of Street Fighter 6, but they didn't. They went all in on it, and it turned out really well. The definitive side of that makes it also widen the scope for other fighting games as well, as far as what they do as far as gameplay and connecting people together with the Battle Hub, World Tour mode, and that kind of stuff. Things outside of just the fighting itself, which is a strong system, is a smart play on them on that end. And I'm sure some of the others, folks in here can talk about the Resident Evil 4 side, but
sure,
obviously that was massive as well this year.
I think it's important to note that this was like a huge year for them to flex the RE engine, right? Because you had RE4 remake, but you also had Street Fighter 6, both built in the same engine, very different games. But yeah, I do think that we need to shout out these engines from time to time. I know Nintendo doesn't really name their engines, but whatever the hell they made Tears of the Kingdom with was pretty sweet too. David, I think you were about to say something about RE4.
Yeah, I figured Denny was gonna pass the ball there because he said RE4 did RE4 things, and that was a little reductive. RE4 is just fantastic. They had a lot to live up to with this remake. They could have just taken a more conservative approach and just taken the RE engine and kind of shepherded the original RE4 onto it, but they modernized everything. It's I think I said this in another category, but it's the first time I've been able to say Resident Evil has a really good story, unironically. It's just fantastic. The systems, the story, the environments. I really loved all of it, and it did. It's one of the best games of the year.
Nice. Yeah, a worthy nominee for sure. Capcom has really been on this nice trajectory for probably 5 years at this point, where they've really turned around all their studios. They've really looked at all their IP except for Mega Man and figured out what to do. I was gonna
say, hoping Mega Man makes a bounce back on that end.
Look, F-Zero 99 happened. A good Mega Man could happen. That's all I'm saying. Like somewhere. Still
praying for Marvel.
We did get a good Mega Man collection this year. We got the Battle Network collection.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Capcom's in a much better place now. We're recording this after Jeff Keighley's award show, and they just announced the new Monster Hunter's coming, so exciting times ahead for the studio too.
Yeah.
And Street Fighter did one fighting game of the year
At the Jeffs,
yes,
for
at
sure.
the Jeffs.
We don't know yet. We have yet to record our best fighting game deliberation, so stay tuned for that.
Well,
Jury's still out.
TJ, you were about to say something.
I was just gonna say that, like, in addition to all, just like putting out 2 amazing flagship games this year, the mix of free and paid support for Resident Evil 4 has been pretty awesome. Like, they put out Resident Evil 4, which was in of itself a great game. Then they put out the Mercenaries update for free. You didn't have to pay a dime on top of that to play Mercenaries mode, which is great. And then you got the Separate Ways campaign, which added like 8 more hours to the game, like on a normal playthrough. And that's just, yes, that's paid DLC, but like the mix of content that they've supported Resident Evil 4 with this year has been steady and fun.
Well said.
Nice. Anyone else have anything they want to mention? Yeah, any Exoprimal fans in the chat? No? Okay.
Capcom can make the Dino Crisis action happen.
Yeah.
Just bring it back. Just if there was ever a time, just.
There was a good idea somewhere in a dinosaur weather report.
It really was. That appealed to me as someone who does a daily weather report about my hometown of Canton. Yeah, let's move on to the next developer. Larian Studios. They made this little game called Baldur's Gate 3. If anyone's heard of it.
They sure did. They developed the hell of that game. I'm also just like always impressed when I think of the fact that like Larian Studios operates like independently. Like they did Baldur's Gate 3 completely on their own. There was no like oversight from a publisher. There wasn't like a Take-Two Interactive or anybody like calling shots at the top as that game was being made, which had to have been the most massive undertaking you can imagine. I know they worked on it for several years, but I think it's kind of a bit of a miracle that they pulled it all off and that game works the way it does, that it doesn't fall apart at the seams at every turn, which it feels like it should, but it doesn't. I think all the systems at play, the narrative, they have developed the shit out of that game, so I think they're a worthy nomination.
I think the most impressive thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is just the amount of potential branching paths in the game. Like, just decisions that you can make and how that affects 50 decisions down the road, and how that could break a game very easily. It's just kind of astonishing how much choice you have in that game and how well thought out those choices are, and how all the outcomes are very well designed. I think they deserve a lot of praise for that.
Someday they should release like a flowchart of like the decisions in conversational, and just like it would just something that this is anecdotal, like, but something that is I find impressive is I actually play a lot of games that are in early access, because a lot of the games that I like to play tend to go into early access. And what happens a lot with an early access game, and we've talked about it before, is that the hype dies in early access. And then they hit 1.0 and it's just kind of like a little bit of a poof, right? Like you hit 1.0, but everybody already knows what your game is about. They've already been in it. They've already played it. And I know that Baldur's Gate 3 was in early access. And for some reason I had that same, like, I don't want to say impression, but I was like a little concerned that maybe it would like come and go and not be as big a deal, just because the game, like the first act, had already been released before and people knew what it was about. But man, they did not have that problem. Like, that's one of the first games that I've seen go through early access and then launch to just like spectacular hype in 1.0.
I think it's
early
because
access forever.
Yeah, their early access period wasn't a fundraising tactic. It was designed to listen to the community and make a game that they wanted. And that's how you do early access right. And yeah, it did take years of early access to get to release, but when they released it, it was in. I try to avoid playing early access games, Bill, for that same reason you're talking about. Is like I don't want to see the sausage made, especially when I have to judge a game later at 1.0, because I do think that'll affect your opinion of a game. But yeah, like just watching their development kind of from the sideline, it's very impressive what they ended up shipping this year. And even though it's not this category, Donovan's point about self-publishing, I think they gave themselves the time to develop this game that they wanted, as opposed to like, well, if you don't hit it by this day on this time, you're gonna miss this bonus or something. I think that the studio took their time and they were rewarded as a result, and they bet on themselves, which I love to see. But yeah, the game's awesome. It's a very good game. It's a very well designed game. It does things that I think other games don't do this year, so they really stuck out as a developer specifically. So a very worthy nominee for this category.
It also feels like the game itself also benefits its presentation when it comes to content creation and stuff like that. I feel like elements of those things, both between like, obviously you have your character creation and things like that, but your companions. But I think that also helps kind of spread the love on that end with the amount of people I've seen who've never touched anything like Baldur's Gate who have hopped on this game and had a great time with it. All of that early access time definitely paid off on that end too.
And I know that like Baldur's Gate 2 and Baldur's Gate are well-liked games, but I really think Larian deserves some credit for like striking while the iron's hot with the popularity of Critical Role right now. I feel like a ton of people who may not have jumped into this game are or did because Critical Role kind of made D&D a little bit more. It made D&D more popular, especially in America, ahead of this game's launch. So it's like right place, right time kind of scenario too. So they kind of striked while the iron's hot. And
we have a lot of tabletop action going now and then, YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that. With the actual creators, and then you have those folks hopping on and starting their own campaigns. It gets more people interested in making their own stories happen, which is fun.
Absolutely. So yeah, anyone else have anything they want to say about Larian Studios for this best developer category? No. Sam, why is Iron Mace here?
I am a big fan of what Iron Mace has done this year. It might not have released the game into 1.0, but I think that they've gone through an interesting year, and I just wanted to acknowledge what they've managed to do. So Iron Mace is currently developing Dark and Darker. Iron Mace consists of some ex-employees from Nexon, and so earlier this year they released a beta or an alpha version of Dark and Darker into the Steam Next Fest demo, and they managed to have 100,000 concurrent players playing this game, which is an extraction game set in like a dark fantasy sort of Dungeons and Dragons sort of feel. You've got clerics and you've got wizards and sorcerers and barbarians and knights and whatnot. But then they were accused by Nexon of stealing code. They were raided by police. They were removed, like Dark and Darker was removed from Steam via a DMCA takedown request, and yet they still had another alpha that was delivered on time, except it was delivered to players via a magnetic link to allow them to torrent the file, which just kind of blew everyone's minds who, might be new to gaming or didn't grow up using LimeWire or, anything else like that. Except after a little bit, Discord and Twitter don't allow torrent links. So Iron Mace had to provide players with a string of digits that players then had to use a hex tool to decode into a magnetic link to download it and continue to play it. And they have now released Dark and Darker into early access on their own platform that they created because they are still not on Steam. And it's just like, talk about a punk up and down sort of narrative through the year. I just thought it was pretty cool.
No, and you're right that they did things that, as a developer, they had to do, but they also they had to kind of skirt around a lot of issues. Yeah,
scrappy, man.
Very scrappy. It's a scrappy developer, especially in this category with giants like Nintendo and Capcom. I like it. I like that there's a scrappy group of developers out there. And Dark and Darker looks pretty cool, actually. So it's
Game's damn fun.
yeah, it's neat that
very fun.
it's neat that they had to. I guess it's not neat, but it's cool that they came to that solution.
Yeah, it's an interesting solution. It's a unique one, and I think it's one that really resonated with a lot of people who maybe grew up acquiring games via that sort of means, and to go, oh, hold up, this is actually like a legit way to share information.
Well, a long time ago, Sam, there weren't torrents, and it was just FTP servers, and they were run by really sketchy characters, and you never knew if what you were downloading was what you were downloading. In this case, like, the devs really created a safe way to distribute their game, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
A nice nomination, Sam, I have to say. But it did, when I was looking at this list, it did kind of stick out to me. So
it does definitely stick out, especially against the titans of, like, you know, Nintendo and Capcom, which have the money and funding and the, like, I guess, legal team to, to go after what they need.
Sure. Awesome. I think you did a great job of advocating for them there, and it's a worthy nominee. Next up is Insomniac Games. They're pretty good at making video games. They released Marvel's Spider-Man 2 this year, a game that tells the story of Peter Parker and Mary Jane and Miles Morales and a little bit of Harry Osborn, a little bit of Norman Osborn there. It's probably the biggest release on PlayStation this year, right? At least just from a
definitely is. Which honestly goes towards my thought that like Insomniac Games is really like PlayStation Studios ace. Like, maybe not their best studio pound for pound. Like if there was a AAA Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog game, maybe those are better. But like, it feels like whenever PlayStation is down or quiet, like Insomniac's always right around the corner with a new Ratchet and Clank or Spider-Man game ready to ship. In a year that would have been really rough for PS5 if that game didn't come out. And it's excellent. It's great. It's the best one they've made so far. I think they've mastered that world now. I doubt that there's really anybody that can make Spider-Man games like Insomniac does. Just the movement, the combat. They you can tell that they're so comfortable in that world now, and this game's great. Love it.
And also just the way that they managed to use the PS5 hardware and the way they make those scene transitions, the loadless transitions between scenes, and the way that they're able to do that with the Portal tech and all that. And also, we saw the port of Ratchet and Clank this year on PC, and we saw that no, they weren't BSing about only the PS5 really being able to fluidly use that tech. And the way Insomniac makes that work is just incredible.
Yeah, it's the speed of their SSD that not everyone has in their PC, and I think it's...
And that not every first-party PlayStation studio manages to take full advantage of the way Insomniac does.
Mm-hmm. There's a mission in Spider-Man 2 where you're kind of chasing a character through portals, and it is stunning. Like, just it's one of those you really have to see it to believe it sort of things in games. And yeah, Donovan, you're right that they did that in Ratchet and Clank, and they do it again in Spider-Man 2, where I think people will take it for granted while they're playing it, but someone who looks for that in games, I was very impressed with that scene specifically. And I like when studios do stuff like that, where there's only one or two moments where you notice this amazing tech, but you're also wowed by it at the same time. And then just the story in Spider-Man 2, I'd say, is pretty solid. And you want to get to the end of that game. So I do think it's definitely the best Spider-Man game I would say it's the best Spider-Man game ever made.
Yeah, I would too.
And that's a huge achievement. And like you said, they're kind of on the first party side for Sony this year. They're kind of carrying a lot of the weight. So they're needed, and I would agree. I think they are, alongside Naughty Dog and Santa Monica Studio, I think they are, and maybe even Sucker Punch. But yeah, they are like the flagship studio now. I think, and you know, they made a Marvel Spider-Man 2 PlayStation bundle and stuff like that.
Yeah, the two different generations of Spidey 2 can be the best thing.
Yeah, I know, right? We went from the Dreamcast one being awesome to now this is awesome. Yeah. I guess that's just a trend. They should just do Spider-Man 2 next instead of Spider-Man 3.
I want to give a quick shout just to kind of build on what you said, Asif, because I'm particularly impressed with their narrative design. The superhero antics aren't really for me. What I've always liked about Batman and Spider-Man in particular is they're juggling a lot of secret identity stuff. In this game, I think giving you two Spider-Men of different ages and backgrounds and points in life gives people characters that could resonate with them. Like, Miles, I feel like is putting off his college essay because maybe he's a little bit afraid to take this step into adulthood. Whereas Peter, I particularly, he resonated with me as someone in their early 40s who's like, his parental figure has passed away, and I lost my dad at an early age, and he's behind on all these bills. He just lost his job. Those pressures of adulthood, what Miles may face one day, are just kind of crushing in on them. So I love their bond, that they can each kind of help each other understand different points of view, and also like give advice as they like, hey, I've been there, hey, I'm gonna be there, sort of thing. I'm really enjoying that aspect of the storytelling in that game.
And just as a mild spoiler warning, but as the symbiote kind of takes hold into the story, that relationship between Pete and Miles really kind of furthers the narrative in a way, and the relationship between Mary Jane and Pete, obviously.
I wanted to chime in on Mary Jane. Like, her missions really aren't my favorite, but I also love that she's got this grit and resolve to make a name for herself, which is something I've certainly identified with over the past 20 years.
Also, just she's a journalist struggling in a world of clickbait, and boy howdy, can all of us relate to that. And I thought they did a really good job of she's far more important in this story than I feel like she has been in the past games, and I think that's cool.
Definitely.
But I have pointed this out just on Slack. If you like the Mary Jane missions in Spider-Man 2, you cannot talk shit about Death Stranding anymore. I'm sorry.
Again.
You really can't. But, it's outside of that, and it's not that I dislike those missions. Obviously, I've played more Death Stranding than most people here. But yeah, maybe this game should have been nominated for a Strand Game of the Year is all I'm saying. With just the Mary Jane missions. But no, like, her missions, to me, like, and Donovan, you mentioned this in your review, but her missions, like, further the story in a really meaningful way in this game, and I just didn't feel like that was the case in the past games.
Yeah, that is definitely the case.
And then, spoiler alert, Venom, very cool. Venom's a cool character. Just gonna throw
Tony
that out.
Todd, shout out to the horror icon there. One only Candyman doing the voice action.
Yeah, and excellent job of voice acting there, and just the character design is outstanding.
Yeah.
For Venom, just everything about it they nailed it, and I think people were a little worried about that when we saw the first few trailers, because we're like, who's Venom? Insomniac was super cagey about who Venom was or the symbiote in general. They nailed it. As someone who completed the game, I can say that story nails it. And
I think that also gives credit to them for, taking some risk on some of that stuff too. I mean, you've got, a massive fan base, and of course, the comic book side, but they've been, pretty open about doing their own thing since the first one.
Yeah.
Folks complained about stuff that time around, and it's like, we got an opportunity to tell our own story here and do, cool things with it.
I'm glad you brought up
read the comics, then there's plenty of them out there.
I'm glad you brought up that they did their own story, because like I'm sitting here playing it, my brother's watching, and we're both Spider-Verse fans, and obviously like Miles' life into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse is different than his life in these games. There's very simple things like his dad, right? Like his dad is alive in one universe and isn't in the other universe, so like stuff like that. He's like, my brother's like, wait a second. Like, Miles' dad? I'm like, nah. He's like, oh. So, like, he instantly becomes more interested. Even if you've read the comics and watched the films, I think Spider-Man fans in general love to see different takes on the story, right? Like, We have Spider-Man 2099 for that reason. Like, we have all sorts of really cool offshoots of this franchise, and this game and this franchise is now one of those. And I think it's cool that they did that instead of just sticking to one canon and just being like, we're gonna recreate this.
And
It
even
makes
in
me-
itself, you know, because I mean, Spider-Man has got the Spider-Verse. I mean, it's got a whole scope like that. So it's like if you're, you know, it's just one universe of many, where things can still be the same and not the same.
Yep.
So yeah, I think like what David brought up with the different narrative scopes and stuff like that too, is pretty cool to see in this game, considering that Marvel's kind of making a shift as well on the comic book side and letting Peter grow up right now in the comic run they have planned, with him having a family and stuff like that with Mary Jane. So there's different elements being served in different media at the same time. So as a Spider fan, I mean, it's a great time to be a fan of the characters.
Yeah, and I love both characters, Pete and Miles, and I left this game loving them even more. So they did an amazing job and deserve this nomination and probably others. But yeah, let's move on to our last nominee in this category, which is a stacked category, I must say, and I will sound like a broken record for the rest of the Shacknews Awards. All of these developers did an amazing job, and Remedy is another one. I believe their official title is Remedy Entertainment.
Yes.
But they shipped Alan Wake 2 this year, and it's great. So, TJ, I believe you reviewed the game for Shacknews. Would you like to chat a little bit about Alan Wake 2?
Yeah, like what a surprisingly like I'll start off by saying I'm not crazy about Alan Wake 1, and one of the main reasons is I don't like Alan Wake as a character. I think he's kind of a piece of shit. But but a lot of people do like Alan Wake, and they love the concepts and they love the stories, and and I think it was a very interesting and unique risk to start a game by playing somebody who's not the titular character in the game that everybody likes. But I think that Saga Anderson is an awesome character, and like what a much more like I think relatable and also like emotionally attachable character to start the game with.
Mm-hmm.
Where if it was just Alan, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much. But then like these guys are so damn good at storytelling, like using using the abilities that Alan has as a writer to reform this fictional world around him, and then like dip into the real world with that and change things there as well. I really liked the mechanics that they came up with and the way that they applied to storytelling and the way that they like bent the rules of storytelling as they went. I think you have to have a certain mastery of storytelling and writing to be able to do that. And I think like as a writer and as like a longtime gamer, like it was really fascinating to see how they used those rules in this game.
Awesome.
Then I'll just kind of reiterate what TJ said. Like it's a studio that made a sequel to a game that came out in 2010 and had like moderate success. Like it's not a Mario game, right? It's not like it's not a huge IP, right? It has its dedicated fan base, and they kept wanting to do it, but they kept having to do other projects first. And this was so close to teeth for Remedy because they had to not do a physical release because they had to budget their money so carefully to make this happen. Again, Epic, and they needed Epic Game Store money to do it as well. So like they had to get all this, and they believed in a game that wasn't necessarily the most popular game or the most popular franchise or the most popular characters, and it ended up being very, very, very good. And I think that just shows a lot about like a dedication as a developer. You know, we're gonna make something because we want to make it, not because it's like popular, right? Or like
I don't think they get this deal from Epic to make this game if they don't ship Control. Like Control opened the door for Alan Wake 2, and they just kicked down the door and were like, we're gonna Alan Wake so hard, you have no idea. And it's like there's a lot of pent up inspiration, I think, in this game. ideas that they probably had to sit on the shelf for a while. And yeah, like you're right. Not everyone likes Alan Wake 1. Hell, I barely remember it, but I do remember enough about it to like see what is going on in Alan Wake 2 and be like, yeah, this is just a lot of those ideas weren't maybe possible in past generations that are now. And I think that Control was that first game where they had this breakthrough in not just storytelling, but like what you can do in games and gameplay. And yeah, I think that Alan Wake 2 is like a direct result of the success of Control. And they built on it, which is kind of astonishing to see.
And it comes full circle too, because people are now going back and playing the first Alan Wake or buying the first Alan Wake because they never played it. And they're like, the first.
It got
the second one.
remastered, right?
Yeah,
and it was available.
Certainly did.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so
It's on Switch, Asif.
oh yeah, okay. That's nice, Aussie.
What, you don't want to play Alan Wake on Switch?
I'm not
No.
sure I want to go back and play Alan Wake in general, but
Yeah, I don't know if I want to play it at all, let alone on Switch. But I'm glad it's an option for people who, maybe they were. I've seen a lot of people be like, should I play Alan Wake 2 if I haven't played Alan Wake 1? And a lot of people are like, oh, there's some references you may miss. I'm like, yeah, but who cares? Like, this is
Yeah.
definitely a new game. Like, just try it. And if you like it, go back and play Alan Wake 1. You'll still enjoy it, So I think that's the, I think it's awesome that this
I've
game
definitely
even
been
exists.
impressed. I think that, both the, as TJ mentioned, the story being awesome, but then the immersion level was also pretty cool. And, just feeling like you're putting together a mystery and stuff like that too. And yeah, and Saga's a great character. I think that the character development across the game is just really well done. Like, it reminds me of some of my favorite sequels, where like maybe the first one was kind of cool, but then like the second one knocks it out of the park. It's definitely the case here on that end.
Yeah. Well, another worthy nominee. Unless anyone has any more to say about Remedy Entertainment and how great they are, we can get to voting. What do you say?
Do it.
Okay. I'm gonna start the vote with Steve of the Steve Tendo Show.
Yep, there you go.
So you're voting for Nintendo?
I am, yeah. Zelda 2, Mario's, and F-Zero 99. I mean, what else can you say?
And Pikmin 4?
And Pikmin 4.
Just a kind of banger year here for Nintendo. Sam.
Nintendo.
Bill.
Larian.
Ozzy.
Larian.
TJ.
I'm gonna go with Nintendo. It was really hard for me to decide between Nintendo and Capcom because I love everything Capcom's doing this year. But man, Nintendo just like so good, 2023.
Greg.
It's funny. I was gonna do Iron Mace, but like Sam said, I don't. They're in the middle of a lawsuit, so like they ended up stealing code. Did they solve that, or is it still being investigated, Sam?
It's still in
Yeah,
court.
so like I don't want to vote for them and find out that they did steal code because that would suck. Because I think Sam really swayed me in that Iron Mace argument. But
Well, mate, I won't hold it against you if you do. It's all right. You didn't steal code.
Yeah. You're not going to be liable for crimes
Yeah.
committed in Korea, Greg,
I'm gonna
by
I'm
voting
gonna,
on a Shacknews Award.
I'm gonna do Remedy.
Remedy. Okay. I'm gonna hold off for now. Donovan.
Larian Studios.
David.
Nintendo.
Danny.
Man, like TJ said, I love what Capcom did this year, but I think it deserves to go to Larian. I'm gonna have to put my vote in there.
Well. Look who's the decider.
Oh my god.
If I really wanted to be chaotic, I could vote for Insomniac and cause a vote off here. And it would just be Greg and me who would have to re-vote.
You'd force your own vote off.
I know. That'd be stupid. Because I'm the decider. Larian released an amazing game this year. Nintendo released several amazing games this year.
And free updates for BG3.
Patch 5, how about it?
Patch 5, represent.
I mean, I would hope a game would have patches and that the patches would be free. That's not. Are you really going to use that in this argument?
I will. Yeah.
You're really going to talk about patches?
Yeah.
What's more impressive? What's more impressive? A game with as many systems as Tears of the Kingdom that just work on a Switch, just 7-year-old hardware, which, by the way, in 2017 when it shipped, that hardware was already 3 years old.
Yeah, it was.
What's more impressive?
I mean, what systems in Baldur's Gate 3? I mean,
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're talking
there's a whole lot of
systems.
systems there.
Like,
Look,
a small independent
But at the end of the day, when I fuse a stick to a rock in Zelda and I hit the thing, I don't have to roll dice. It just breaks. The thing breaks. It doesn't matter if I roll a 7. The rock breaks, and then I get my amber.
But wouldn't it be cool if Zelda was D&D? That'd be pretty dope. That's a free idea.
Get out of here. You're out of order. You're out of order. Get out of my house. You're out of order. You're all out of order.
Presented new ideas, you know.
That's just ridiculous. All I'm pointing out is that they're very different games. Both of them have intricate systems.
Mm-hmm.
But Larian shipped one game this year, and Nintendo went and they redesigned 2D Mario after all this awesome Zelda stuff that we had, which I put almost 200 hours into Tears of the Kingdom.
Right.
After that, we get Mario Wonder.
Yeah. But my thing with Nintendo, right? Like that argument, wouldn't that better suit publisher then? Because it's not like the same team made Mario Wonder, Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, right? Like those are all Nintendo's very like smoke and mirrors about who's really
Lots
making
of
what
umbrella
outside of
stuff
like
under the umbrella.
If you go look at
producers.
If you go look at the credits for Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder, there are going to be people who worked on both.
Definitely possible, yeah.
And it was like an all hands on deck scenario for Tears of the Kingdom when it came to combat systems. Nintendo Pictures is credited in it. Wonder, while you're right that they're not necessarily the same teams, Wonder has 5 of the same people who were credited on the first Mario game.
Wild.
Ever. The first Super Mario Bros. For NES. 5 developers are credited for that game, are still in the credits for Wonder. So while you're right, you're also kind of wrong. There's just like, yes, they're a developer. They have multiple studios inside their development studio because they're big. They've been around since 1889. I don't think that's a negative against them. But you might be right that it's for them in the case of publishing. But then we're going to get into this argument about publishing that, Larian published their game and they took a huge risk on themselves too. So I feel like we're going to run into this same argument in both categories, Donovan. Right?
Yeah, man. They both had amazing years,
So yeah, I'm voting for Nintendo. Just an amazing year for Nintendo. I'm sorry. And Larian had an awesome year too. And I appreciate
There are 11 dictator with his gavel. There are wrong votes. Everyone's out of order.
Everyone's vote here was good. I'm just saying sometimes there are some bad votes out there. I'm not saying that this was a category. I already stated that every nominee deserved to be here. They all did hard work. We appreciate the work of all developers and the time it takes to make a game as detailed as Tears of the Kingdom or Baldur's Gate 3 or Alan Wake 2 or RE4 Remake or Dark and Darker, or even Spider-Man 2. But this year, which is really going to be the last year, I think, of banger Switch titles, I think Nintendo deserves this one. Congratulations, Nintendo. You're our Shacknews Awards winner for Best Developer of the Year 2023. And oh, by the way, they didn't really fire anyone this year either over there. Shout out, Nintendo. They actually gave people raises.
What am I going to do with the award? Nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do.